Alexei Navalny's widow says she will take up her husband's cause and fight against Russian President Vladimir Putin's oppression. In a video posted to social media today, Yulia Navalny accused Putin of killing her husband ahead of meetings with European Union leaders today. The EU's top diplomat promising Putin and his regime will be held accountable. Meanwhile, earlier today, authorities denied Navalny's mother access to a morgue where his body is believed to be held, prompting accusations of a cover-up.
3 дня назад Владимир Путин убил моего мужа Алексея Навального.
Yulia Navalny, the widow of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, says she will continue her husband's fight and is calling on supporters to battle President Vladimir Putin with a greater fury than ever.
Я прошу вас разделить со мной ярость. Ярость, злость, ненависть к тем, кто посмел убить наше будущее.
In a video message released today, Navalny says she would continue the fight of her dead husband for a free Russia, repeating Navalny's mantra that it is not shameful to do little, but shameful to do nothing.
Я буду продолжать дело Алексея Навального, продолжать бороться за нашу с вами страну.
Navalny's call from abroad for resistance to Putin comes less than a month before a presidential election that is almost certain to hand the Kremlin chief another 6-year term. Authorities have reportedly denied Navalny's mother access to a morgue where his body is believed to be held after his death last week in an Arctic penal colony. Navalny is alleging that officials' refusal to hand over the body to her mother-in-law is part of a cover-up.
Why are the Russian authorities not handing over his body? Do you have something to hide?
Well, I think that the reason is simple, because the forensic medical investigation is not over yet.
The Kremlin has denied involvement in his death, and Russian authorities said that the cause for Navalny's death Friday at the age of 47 is still unknown. But the results of any investigation are likely to be questioned abroad. Many Western leaders have already said they hold Putin responsible for the death.
I've heard several things I haven't had it confirmed, but the fact of the matter is Putin is responsible. Whether he ordered it or not, he is responsible for the circumstances put that man in. And he is a reflection of who he is. And it just cannot be tolerated.
What has happened reminds us all of the repressive and oppressive nature of the regime in the Russian Federation, and of how President Putin has ruthlessly put down any opposition and suppressed any dissent.
At the very least, we should be talking about sanctions, first of all, and then demand of, the release of his body and a proper burial that his family and the people who trusted in him, that they deserve.
The great responsible is Putin himself. But we can go down to the institutional structure of the penitentiary system in Russia. But don't forget who is the real responsible for the Navalny's death.
Today, the Kremlin saying that the West's reaction to Navalny's death is unacceptable, but that the obnoxious statements from the United States and Europe would not harm Putin. Despite that, the world continues to rally behind Navalny's cause. Protests and vigils have been held across the globe, including in Russia. Local authorities have been taking down any memorials that pop up around the country and have arrested several demonstrators. Let's bring professor and political analyst Henry Giroux into the conversation. Henry, what did you think of Navalny's widow's video message today?
Oh, I thought it was very moving, and I thought it was everything one would anticipate from a woman who is as politically active as her husband, and of course is crushed by the death of her husband. And I think that what she's doing is trying to reach out to the world and make a statement that's more than personal, that this is an incredible political event that speaks to larger issues, not just about his death, of course, not just about Navalny's death, but also about the opposition, what's happening to journalists all over the world who are being assassinated or being killed. I mean, as you know, in Gaza now, 77 journalists have been killed, 7 have been killed in the Ukraine. And I think that what we have to understand is what this represents. We're talking about authoritarianism and what it does to critics.
We're seeing Navalny's legacy being continued through his family. Do you think anyone else will step up?
I mean, of course, Navalny has an organization that supports his work outside of Russia. And so it seems to me that will hopefully mobilize even more so that organization. But I think that Navalny's death illustrates something crucial that can't be ignored. And that is there are warning signs here that don't just speak to Russia, but also speak to the United States. I mean, speak to what's happening on the part of Israel in Gaza. Speaks to what has happened above all to Julian Assange. I mean, it seems to me this case between Navalny and Julian Assange is something that we really have to think about here. I mean, these are brave journalists who are moral witnesses who are doing everything they can to support the truth and make it public. Their moral witnessing is combined with a sense of enormous civic courage. This is what it means to be a public intellectual. What's at stake here, if I may, is really democracy. We're not just talking about the death of a brave and brilliant journalist and oppositional critic in Russia. We're talking about a message that we all need to take seriously.
Speaking of repressing journalists, we've seen an even larger crackdown in Russia since their invasion of Ukraine. Could we ever see a free Russia?
I want to hope that authoritarian regimes never last so long that they become eternal. You know, I mean, look, nobody thought the divine right of kings would end, and it did. and it seems to me that the forces of opposition, the forces fighting for freedom, while they may not be as visible as they could be. Remember, 400 people were just arrested in Russia protesting Navalny's death. That's incredibly courageous, given what you know the consequences are going to be. You could be arrested and shipped off to Siberia, and yet they're still protesting. The truth is suppressed. Dissent is squelched. There's an attack now going on in universities in the United States, claiming anyone who basically supports Palestinian rights is somehow anti-Semitic. This is nonsense. It's just sheer nonsense. And it seems to me that we have to look at what Navalny did and make sure we understand what its implications are in other countries fighting for democracy, and do everything we can to make sure the matters of justice are connected to the matters of the fight for truth.
Now, regardless of if Putin had a direct hand in Navalny's death, Putin's actions led to it. What do you believe the international response to Navalny's death should be?
I think the international response should be an acute awareness of the forces that produce this kind of tyranny, and not limited to simply Russia. And look at the ways in which that form of tyranny is emerging all over the world, the United States and Israel and other countries, where people are being suppressed for dissent, where people are being fired, people are being arrested in places, where schools are being shut down, where the forces of authoritarianism take different forms in different countries, but the end point is the same. Remember, the first casualty of authoritarianism are the minds that would oppose it.
Henry, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Trending Now.
They were great questions. Thank you so much.